Hello everybody. It's been more than 3 months since we settled 3 very different spiders into one terrarium. Let's see what changes have taken place during this time, and a lot of them have happened here, you guys. Let's start perhaps with the Black Widow. This is the most venomous and dangerous spider of all 3. With the expectation that the Black Widow might like this, we threw Turkmen cockroaches into the terrarium. They have a soft chitinous shell, so they are just right for a Black Widow with a small size. In addition, cockroaches prefer to move on vertical surfaces, which means that it will be convenient for them to climb on a snag, and this is only on the spider's hand, although rather on a paw, or even 8 paws. But no matter how hard we try to please the Black Widow, he was at last seen a week after the creation of the terrarium. Since then, he has disappeared, just once again climbed into the hole of a rotten tree and did not get out again. It is we who put forward the version that he has remained in the tree forever. Perhaps at night he could even become a victim of other inhabitants of the terrarium, the bird eater or the tarantula. Anyway, the most venomous and dangerous of the 3 spiders still did not take root here. In other words, the conditions were not for him at all. Maybe the truth about where he went we'll never really know. Then we offer the same delicacy as the Turkmen cockroach tarantula. Not just offered, but we pushed them right underneath his nose. But the spider did not appreciate this generous gesture and began to run away. The calculation was that it would be possible to see the moment of the attack on the victim with the subsequent process of eating, but this was definitely not part of the tarantula's plans now. However, tarantulas rarely hunt outside the nest, and even if they do, they prefer to do so at night. Basically, his method of hunting is somewhat more lazy. He's just waiting for a careless victim to fall into his hole. Probably this approach is much more effective. Once an annoying wasp flew into the hangar. Well, we decided to put it inside of the terrarium. Even if it is a stinger, it's still an insect, which means that it should be ideal for the spider's diet. I must say, the wasp was not upset at all once inside. At some point, it became so arrogant that it climbed into the hole of the tarantula, but at the last moment changed its mind and passed up the opportunity. And the most interesting thing happened the next morning when we continued to observe the terrarium. There was the wasp already without its head. I wonder which of the remaining spiders in the diet includes only the heads. Or is the head just the most delicious spare part of an insect like a wasp? Subsequently, we also found an Argentine cockroach without a head. And so which of the spiders is the decapitator here? But in fact, everything can be much simpler. Perhaps all these insects have too hard of a shell, so the poor spiders have to be much more content with their heads. And who has a really soft shell? This is the zoophorbic larva. Now we will throw it directly into the hole for the tarantula and just take a look to see what'll happen. It turns out that the method of hunting the spider justified itself. The prey fell on him by itself. Well, he immediately attacked the victim. It was a mess, and a real interspecific struggle began. Throughout, the spider actively stings the zoophobus to paralyze. This time, the shell turned out to be much weaker than the spider's jaws, and a white mass of the larva's insides is already pretty visible. After a short delay, the spider tightly grasped its victim and began to eat it. However, the larva is still sluggishly trying to escape, but it will definitely not emerge victorious from this battle. And by the way, yes, the tarantula eats the head of this larva. You can clearly see how well he works with his mandibles. The most attentive of you probably noticed a cocoon that was in a hole near a tarantula during the meal with the larva. You can actually even roughly compare its dimensions with a ballpoint pen. Pretty small, right? But there are eggs inside the cocoon, from which small spiders will hatch over time. By the way, the spider mostly prefers to carry the cocoon with him, you never know what. Although in rare cases, the cocoon still remains in the nest alone, and the tarantula just goes outside for a walk. Now it's time to move on to the bird eater. This one turned out to be the most active of the spiders, even though it seems to be quite slow in appearance. The bird eater always has a lot to do. Then he will climb inside the jug and braid all the approaches to it so that no one gets close, so that way he can sit there for a couple of days. After sleeping it off, the bird eater drove to wander around the terrarium. Then it will climb into a coconut or climb up a snag. It's a really busy spider all the time. At some point, it got caught underneath the snag, and at first glance, it was just sitting doing nothing, but the next day, a large pit was found in its place, in which several bird eaters could fit inside of it. Approximately 3 weeks after the creation of the terrarium, the spiders became pretty bald. As it turned out, they began to molt, and they will soon flaunt their new coat, but it's still a really long time before that happens, so in the meantime, the bird eater is shedding, and apparently is already cringing from this. At some point, it went so crazy that it drove the tarantula out of its hole and started settling himself in there. The latter had to retreat so quickly that it already threw its cocoon underneath the nearest stone. On one of the next observation days, we looked inside of the terrarium and saw that the bird eater was lying and wasn't moving. Just somehow suddenly, he died. We felt really sorry for him after all. We managed to get attached to the residents of this terrarium. The story could have ended there, but no. As soon as we pulled the lifeless body out, it turns out that it was just a shell dropped by the bird eater during molting. Meanwhile, the updated spider itself was sitting quietly over there by the snag, and we didn't notice it the entire time. As if realizing that everybody was searching for him, the bird eater climbed on the glass and settled down in plain sight. Apparently, this is how he makes it clear that everything is fine with him and there's no need to panic. Or he was just deciding to show off his new fur. And just look at how big he's become. You can immediately see why he was shedding, because he was very cramped in that old shell. However, you probably noticed yourself how much the bird eater has grown. Now it's not so easy for him to get inside of the jug, which he loved so much. But the coconut shell house is just right for him, and it's so cozy. It's not at all cramped. It's perfect size. And now let's compare the sizes of the spiders. The bird eater has grown so much in these 3.5 months that it has already significantly overtaken the tarantula in size. But initially, both spiders, when we first settled them in here, had the same size. Now the bird eater has become visually twice as large. Maybe even 3 times. And it's not quite clear where the tarantula's hind leg has gone. There seem to be 8 of them quite recently. Did this furry thug really get it off? Now this is the biggest mystery of the terrarium. All of a sudden, the bird eater put his paw on the paw of the tarantula. Interesting. What does this mean? Don't be upset, buddy, or you've been behaving badly, so I'm gonna tear off another paw of yours. How do we make out this nonverbal spider language? By the way, I forgot to clarify one more interesting detail. As soon as the summer heat sets in, we had to significantly expand the size of the drinker. On particularly hot days, the contents of the drinker went away in a matter of hours. At first, we replaced the water shell with a plastic lid, but soon it had to be replaced with a little petri dish so that the fires always had plenty of water in there. And finally, the routine of life in the terrarium was diluted by very joyful events. The birth of small tarantula spiders. However, unfortunately, we missed the very moment of the hatching since it apparently fell on our 2-week vacation. We really wanted to be able to witness this experience, but it didn't work out for us this time. It's just that at some point, they began to notice that small spiders were running around the terrarium. However, they're so small that it's honestly pretty difficult to detect them. Besides, because of the color, they merge strongly with the surrounding environment, and it's just really hard to remove such small objects. And you can now see for yourself what small-sized young spiders have in comparison with the tweezers, or even with the Turkmen cockroach that has been crawling out of the bone for a while. And the size will be even more obvious if we compare it to the mother of the tarantula and her offspring. Remember at the beginning of the video when we showed you how we threw zoophobus larvae into the terrarium for the spiders? Although spiders have a great appetite, some of the larvae escaped their attention and even managed to transform into real beetles. There are literally a whole bunch of them now. Although, it's even better this way. Now the spiders have an additional food supply, but the beetles can begin to breed and even produce new larvae. By the way, there are a lot of different insect parts in the terrarium now, including locusts, and there are even wings left over from them. But we extracted one of the zoophobus beetles from the bone. The first thing that caught my eye was how his head was eaten the same way as the others, but it turned out that all the insides were also eaten out. Yeah, we're getting some sort of a crazy terrarium up in here. But now it's like a real little world with its own ecosystem, which also regulates itself. And this is something that you can keep on watching. Who hasn't liked this video yet? We're not gonna do any hints. That's all for now. Bye bye.